public meeting or something. People think
Okay.
we have a conspiracy because we can't get the video in the room.
Another conspiracy. There you go. Okay, we're live. Live and loaded.
Recording?
Yes.
I'd like to call to order the August 16th, 2023 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. Start things off with the housekeeping. Let's take a look at tonight's agenda. See if there are any additions or deletions necessary, and give me a motion from the commission.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's take a look at the minutes from July 19th meeting. Make a motion if you're satisfied with those.
Motion to
So,
approve meeting minutes.
Did you get the July 19th minutes or did you get the June 7th minutes?
Oh, I got the June 7th too, now that I'm looking at it closer. I thought something was amiss. Okay, well, let's not worry about the July minutes.
I
Yeah.
figured the date was just wrong on it.
What's
I
that?
figured the date was just wrong on it.
Did they not connect?
Well, this is the June 7th minutes.
I will have to look into that on Unicode. I apologize.
We'll just do it. We'll
Do it
worry about
next
it
time.
next time. Yeah. Okay. This time, if any member of the public wants to make a comment not related to tonight's public hearing, feel free to do so. We'll have opportunity to make public comment during the public hearing portion of the meeting. No comments. So moving on. Do we have any staff reports? No. Dan? No reports? Okay. With that, I guess, let's see here. Let's move into the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering a recommendation on the City of Tenino 2023 Housing Action Plan. The procedure I would like to follow tonight is as follows. There'll be a staff presentation followed by questions to the Planning Commission from the audience. Oh, no, followed by questions from the Planning Commission. Yeah, that's it. That's you, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. No applicant presentation, and then there'll be opportunity for public testimony. Now, does any commissioner wish to disclose him or herself for any personal or financial interest in the matter before us tonight, or does any commission member wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts? All commissioners respond yes or no. What do you guys say?
No.
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 No. Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body as appointed by the Tenino City Council to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation on this matter? Not hearing anything. Move on. Dan Penrose, our city planner, will now make a presentation regarding the Housing Action Plan.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. So tonight before you, you have about 18 months worth of work, give or take. Many of you, at least 3 of you, have been on the commission for the duration of that effort. So I'm going to provide a bit of an overview for your sake as well as the members of the audience. Talk a little bit about the objectives of the HAP, talk a little bit about the outreach effort and the process, and then I can make myself available for questions to wrap up. So there should be hard copies of the Housing Action Plan that I distributed. I will say before we get going, my apologies, we did omit 2 of the appendices to the actual plan. Both of those appendices you'd seen before and reviewed, but they were not on the initial upload to the city's website. Those are part of the record now, and they are in the hard copy packet, and the people in the audience have that version. We did receive one public comment, which I'll get to here in a moment, and that individual is also provided with the appendices. So for those people who have requested the packet should be complete with those updated appendices. So the city of Tenino received a $75,000 grant from the Department of Commerce to complete an analysis of the city's housing situation. That was part of a legislation that was passed in 2019 under House Bill 1923, excuse me, to encourage cities to plan under the GMA to do a few specific things related to housing options and housing affordability. As you all know, we are in a housing crisis of a variety of types. And so the state has really asked cities and counties to focus on looking at their housing in their community, their residential uses, and seeing what we could do to increase affordability, accessibility, and use and type. The HAP is a tool that does some strategies and implementing actions to promote greater housing diversity and access for residents across all income levels. There is quite a bit of a discussion about the annual median income and making sure people across those income brackets have the ability to get to housing. This is kind of an early step to gathering data on housing. You also know that at the last meeting we rolled out our scope of work for the periodic update to the comprehensive plan. And so the city of Tenino will be embarking on another about year and a half long project to review and evaluate the entirety of the comprehensive plan, including the housing element, for new forecasts and new improvements, and checking on just goals, policies, and objectives across that entire plan. So this HAP is a bit of a precursor to that, which is going to be helpful. So the housing objectives that came out of the initial efforts were to, I'll just list them out, and they are in the plan right there on whatever page is that, page 6. The housing objectives are to increase the supply and variety of housing to serve identified housing needs, reduce displacement of low-income residents resulting from redevelopment. That's also called gentrification, just kind of as an aside. Ensure opportunities for housing affordability are provided for residents at all income levels. Create opportunities for accessible housing for residents, especially low and moderate income households. Encourage development of a variety of housing types to create diversity in the community. And finally, accommodate moderate density options within urban growth areas and the city. That was kind of our front end marching orders. Those are very similar to HAP strategies and objectives across the state. And in our conversations, again, we talked about why that was and how some of these strategies are common across jurisdictions in our state. I wanted to talk a little bit about the public engagement plan and the commerce process that we used. Just again, as a bit of stepping back as we step forward into the public hearing. The Planning Commission kicked off, I made a presentation on January 13th of 2022. We did community interviews in August of 2022. Those interviews are present in the appendices. Those are the findings of the public comment and the interview. It's not all the people we contacted. I can, we had a list, and I think I ran those past you at that January 13th, 2022 meeting. We provided you with an update on the housing needs assessment at your December 14th meeting of 2022. And in January and February meetings, we shared with you some different strategies to look at some of the things that housing needs assessment had revealed. In this spring, we provided several versions of draft copies of the HAP, and you reviewed those and provided feedback. We did have to do SEPA DNS. SEPA is required on GMA and plans, so we did a non-project review for SEPA. That was issued in July, at the end of July, July 25th. Public notice was also made on July 25th, published in the newspaper and on the city's website. The local comment period and the state comment period is July 25th through August 16th. So that is Planning Commission public hearing is today for now, and the City Council public hearing is scheduled for September, I believe it's September 10th, something like that, in next month, but that can be any time in the month of September, and we'll still meet our grant requirements through Department of Commerce. So Commerce has awarded all of the money, and we're in the grant closeout process. But that's kind of based on us adopting the plan by September. So finally, some of the summary findings that we had that I wanted to highlight. Tenino is projected to grow in population over the next 20 years. As you recall from our conversations on growth, and the Growth Management Act has been present in the state since 1990, 1991. And as part of that, the State Office of Financial Management and the local planning organization, in this case it would be Thurston Regional Planning Council, work to determine growth rates in counties, and the counties then work with the cities to allocate that growth. In other words, you have 100,000 new people coming to Thurston County, and how much of those 100,000 people are going to end up in Tenino? How many are going to end up in Yelm or Rainier or even the Rochester UGA and all throughout? So that population is allocated over a span of time, and then it's our responsibility to make sure that Tenino has the ability to accommodate that growth. So we look at the residential use types and some of the mixed use allowances, and make sure that we have ample space to accommodate that future growth. So that's our responsibility under the Growth Management Act. While there is residential capacity for undeveloped areas in Tenino, a lot of the development will come through infill, and the city also needs to work to prioritize and ensure that capacity doesn't expand in a way that causes negative impacts to the housing market vis-a-vis vacancy rates. So you need to have enough supply that you have kind of healthy growth, and not a restricted supply that causes a catastrophic increase in prices. And we've talked about that. So currently there's a shortage of low-income housing, senior housing, and nursing homes in the city. That's also very common across the state. The previously dedicated kind of master plan community that's known as West Tenino, that portion of the city is no longer available for residential use. So because of the presence of endangered species, the Mazama paca gopher. And so we need to make sure that as we go through the comp plan update process, that we're aware of that, and we're evaluating how we might gain sufficient residential capacity to meet our growth targets. The housing action plan doesn't actually change the land use categories. It doesn't change the comp plan. It's kind of like an add-on to the comp plan. It needs to be consistent with the comp plan, and several of the appendices talk to the consistency of that. But the real action on the housing action plan comes in the comp plan, because that's what piece is going to help us evaluate the buildable lands and the growth and accommodation across the city, and also turns into development regulations, budget, capital improvement plans, transportation improvement plans, and all the other things that kind of move the needle on the character and growth of a community. So finally, increased density and density within the borders is what I heard you asking for predominantly in the meetings. That was also borne out by the community interviews that we held with people. And so there's an important thing to remember, that everything we heard, that Tenino wants to kind of retain its small town charm and doesn't want to grow in a way that is inconsistent with the character of what you've come to love in this place. And so this plan is a policy document. It doesn't mandate anything. It does have policy language that says the city should, and the city should evaluate, and the city should consider, and those are the types of things that are in the document. So it's really the start of the conversation, and a lot of the conversation ends up being fulfilled in the comp plan and additional action items that can come afterwards. So thanks for the opportunity for the presentation, and I hope that helps a little bit with setting some context, and whatever questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions from the commission for Dan?
No.
I have questions. I actually have quite a couple, but I guess the biggest one to start with page 59 compared to page 62. I'm just curious if I'm reading this right. So on page 62, it highlights essentially the Tenino Ranch, all of the city land where the ag park is going as pocket gopher area. But then when you look at page 59, it specifically highlights that as 2 to 5 units per acre. And obviously that's over the 20 plus years. But if we're talking about the restrictions due to pocket gophers, is that actually a reasonable allocation of housing and expectations over the next 20 years?
Is there a way to precisely ask that question? So I hear you're saying you think there might be are there inconsistencies between the two pages, or you just are asking about how perhaps figure 25 on page 59 is interpreted?
I guess I'm asking both questions. I'm asking if I'm interpreting it right, and then if so, is that not going to be an issue with the environmental restrictions that are in that area?
Okay, so let's deal with the first one first, which is on page 62, figure 28 is the Mazama Pocket Gopher area map, right? Yeah, that's the one you're asking about. And so that is showing areas that are thought to contain Mazama Pocket Gophers based on Thurston County geodata.
Soil type, right?
Kind of. Esri and City of Tenino. So it's not quite soil type. It's more of
Like they have the right habitat, essentially.
yeah, because some of that soil, you know how soil maps look. They look like camouflage. I mean, they're kind of all
Sure.
over the place. So that's more just an indication on a part. That's probably on a parcel basis. So I guess maybe the way I would answer that the most succinctly would be, most of that land is known to have pocket gopher habitat, and most of it is no longer in private ownership. Most of that land in West Tenino is owned by either the Conservation Fund or the state of Washington, and it is in process of transferring to the state of Washington for habitat set-asides. And perhaps the larger portion of the parcels that are owned by the state will likely be like a wildlife area, like Scatter Creek Wildlife Area. I think that's the intent of the state when they bought it from the private property owner. There is a portion in the middle that has private ownership where all the structures are at. That's an equestrian center that does and has continued to operate as an equestrian center, and they've had to make sure that any activity that they have out there has a gopher study done in order to prove that there are no gophers present on that particular piece of land that they're using. So that's the first part. So I don't think we're going to get much in the way of any residential capacity out of West Tenino.
Gotcha. So then I guess my question on 59 is like allocated towards essentially 2 to 5 units per acre.
Yeah, so
the
what I would
2020
direct your attention to then, Matthew, would be that 2017 is the date on the end of that. So that map was created in 2017, and it was a projection of how they expected to be able to grow residential density in Tenino into 2045.
Gotcha.
And we are now saying we can't do this anymore because you have to lop off that whole western expanse, which, as you said, has like a between 1 unit per 5 to 2 to 5 units an acre, depending on the color. That's no longer in the mix for buildable land.
That makes
So-
sense.
So that area that we had thought that we could grow to, we can no longer grow to, so we have to find somewhere else to grow.
Gotcha.
And again, the Housing Action Plan makes recommendations on that, but it doesn't actually change the map. The map changes all, and anything related to density and minimum lot size and all those other pieces come at the comp plan and development regulation level.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you for that explanation.
Sounds good. Should I read my comment now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have anything else, or we?
Hold
Yeah.
on. I think
Sorry.
I had one more question. I guess my last question, and this seems like a dumb question, but really when looking at the numbers, like obviously we're told by, well, I guess I don't know completely how the process works, but Thurston County decided how many people were going to, or how much the population was going to grow in the next 20 years, and then allocated that. So I guess from your experience doing this, and obviously you guys made this, so I think you believe this to be mostly true, or fully true, or not that I'm saying it's not true, but anyway. Sorry, my whole question is, do you think the allocated growth towards Tenino is realistic in your experience in city planning? Because like it's kind of a lot, but I also know that the population is growing a lot, and then that equates to essentially single housing units needing to increase by 50% over the next 20 years, which seems like also a lot.
I do. I think 396 units is a lot. I also think it's reasonable to assume that that's the demand. Now, whether you can meet that, I mean, I bet if you built all 400 at once, you probably wouldn't fill them all at once, but in pretty short order, I bet they'd be full.
Okay.
Depending on, the price point is really what everybody's seeing right now.
Yeah.
And if you recall, commissioners, I showed you an example from Castle Rock that had a 796 square foot tiny home. It sold for $268 in Castle Rock. And if you remember, they were decent. They looked nice on the inside. I looked at them again today, but you remember those?
Yeah.
They were skinny mini lots. I think they were like 25 feet long or wide by like 60 feet deep, and the house fit almost 800 square feet, almost $300,000. So if you built housing stock for 300 or 350 new, they're gonna roll. So yes, I think the demand's there. I won't speculate on all the other pieces, but our region's going to continue to grow, and Tenino's a delightful place, and people are going to seek it out.
Gotcha. Do you feel like the city of Tenino has enough land for essentially that amount of single dwelling units?
I think that depends. I think that depends on what you do with some of the recommendations in the Housing Action Plan, and how you fit those 396 units. I mean, if they're all in 796 square foot dwelling units, you probably could fit them within, a handful of lots on the city. If you do a more traditional style of development where you have detached single family in a subdivision, like maybe what you see in unincorporated county, or even in like Hidden Meadows, which is a traditional kind of a cul-de-sac development, you'll eat through your land pretty quick before you get to your 400 units. So most of the places that you're seeing these types of residential migration to are going vertical.
Gotcha.
To accommodate the uses. So you get two choices, right? You either get to go, infill with what you got, and that at some point, in order to infill with what you got, you have to go up, or you push out. And neither of them are perfect.
Gotcha. Thank you. That answers my questions.
How are we addressing the issue of water rights? Do we have enough water rights to accommodate 50% increase, or do we have a plan on how we might get those?
I think that's going to be a big issue in the comp plan update, just to be candid. I think we didn't look at that too much in the housing action plan because there were a lot of other things we looked at that we were required to look at per the grant, and utilities and water is not one of them. I don't know the full situation on the water availability or the water rights situation. I know Yelm got held up with theirs for a long time, so it's a real issue. It can definitely cause slowdown of the growth arc, but in the comp plan, that's going to be something we'll have to look very carefully at, because that's kind of, you remember my three C's. You know, one of the C's was concurrent, which has to be there and available at the time that you're doing the thing. Well, you have to have water, right? If you don't have water, you're not supposed to build.
Okay, and go ahead.
Good. I was just going to mention, I know the last meeting that I recall that they talked about water rights, I think we're doing pretty good. I mean, water rights are one of those things that takes so many years to get.
Yeah.
So we have to look forward still, but we didn't have an immediate crisis. I know that. And we had room for some growth, if I remember the report right. But again, you look at things like conservation, you don't have to necessarily have water. Conservation can be a way to get more water rights. So there's many ways you can look at water, but we're not in a crisis right now. Like, we can't do any more growth, but it's something that's going to have to be addressed, like you said.
Okay. Any other comment on water rights? Everything's good? Okay, my other comment is on page 14. It's the first mention of building heights as something the stakeholders had recommended through the interviews. And then it's mentioned as building height negotiations with developers. It's mentioned as a goal 2 times, once on page 27 and once on page 30. And basically, I guess I'll just read my comment. At no time during our discussions or during the development of the Housing Action Plan supporting the studies or documents dating back to 2022 did we discuss building height allowances in association with the Housing Action Plan. We were originally going to have a public hearing tonight, a second public hearing regarding a text amendment on allowing 50-foot building heights in town, but that was canceled. Let's see. And at that time, the commissioners requested additional information and examples on building heights. And so it seemed like we still had a lot of questions about including that. And so moving into the comprehensive plan updates and the visioning, to see it mentioned as a goal several times in this document when we haven't had a chance to discuss, and there was obviously an interest in further discussion of building heights in the last meeting. I just don't like that is mentioned in this document all of a sudden when it wasn't part of our discussions before. We had talked about negotiating with developers, giving them incentives such as increased densities, that kind of thing, some vagaries, but not specifically mentioning building height increases. And seeing it in here, I feel like, and listening, knowing the fact that these goals are going to transfer over into the comp plan, I just feel like I would like to see that language of building heights specifically just struck from here. None of the stakeholder interviews that I read in the appendix mentioned building heights, and there was a question put to the interviewees that specifically mentioned building heights, and not one of them said that building heights were a limitation on development. But then it's mentioned on page 14 as something that came out of that process. And I don't understand how it got in there when it was never mentioned. I get that it's a possible tool in the planner's, toolbox, but at the same time, I also know that this community has traditionally wanted to remain a small town, and if we start allowing, I feel like if we open the door for 50-foot building heights, we're kind of deciding the future of the community before the visioning process by putting it in goals in this housing action plan. If it needs to be discussed during the visioning process, I feel like that's the appropriate time to do that, and maybe that's the only decision you know, we can make at the end of that visioning, but, you know, I just feel like incorporating it into here as though it came from stakeholders is not really appropriate at this time. And I'd like to see, you know, in the final draft of this, I'd like to see that removed personally. And so I guess that's pretty much my comment on the building heights portion, and, you know, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess to respond to that kind of comment and question, we didn't take a verbatim set of comments from the community interviews in particular, because we're having a conversation, and recording is just not the way we get you know, good, honest feedback. If you look through it, I think you'll see you're right. There's no overt request for a height increase from the community members, but I do believe there is a sentiment throughout, especially in the downtown, on the downtown side, for looking for ways to bring people downtown, keep them downtown,
Sure.
and provide extra kind of energy and vitality to the downtown. And you do that by bringing residents there. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be vertical. You can, you know, mixed use. We've talked about that before with, you know, back of shop residences. But it is I think the way you put it is fair, which it is a common tool that planners use. As I said, you either go up or you go out eventually, and you can do a combination of the two clearly. But the plan doesn't call for any specific dimensional increases or changes. You know, it's a recommendation. So it's, you know, it's stuff like offer developers density and or height incentives for desired unit types, but it doesn't say
Well,
what unit types, and it
But by
doesn't say.
saying you're offering density increases, you're covering what would be a building height in a way could be a variety of different things.
Yeah,
Density is just one of the, height is just one of the things that could increase density. I mean, maybe that's the best one. But
Yeah.
I don't know that for sure, but I do know that I am fairly certain that if we start putting in 50-foot buildings, number one, the town is so narrow that stepping down to the surrounding single-family, single-story residential units is going to be difficult. There's not a lot of space for maintaining lines of sight or solar, you know, availability, that kind of thing, in a town that has one commercial, basically, strip. And I think that once you start putting in larger buildings of that size, you're pretty much going to end up with larger buildings of that size down the whole downtown. And I wonder if the people who live here now would want that. Not to say that it may not be, maybe our only option, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm just saying to state it as a goal in the goals section specifically kind of presupposes that that's what people want, sort of, as a community. That's a goal of ours, to allow building height increases, and I'm just not sure that if you interviewed the town, interviewed people, that you would get a response that said, yes, 50-foot buildings is the way to go. I feel like that would be fairly unpopular, but I don't know, because we haven't asked.
And again, I don't think there is a goal for specifically increasing height. I think there's an action for offering height incentives, which that is clearly has to go up. You're not going to give them incentive for tearing a floor out, but there's no real dimensions, and there's nothing behind that other than, hey, we should look into this. This would be a potential action. So,
Right.
but I hear you.
The proposed timing says implementation within 6 years, according to the hourglasses, if I'm understanding that right.
Mhm.
And it, then the goal is mentioned on page 27 that corresponds to that action item. A goal, which one is it? Action 3 of it says a goal. I don't know. Maybe it's semantics, but I do feel like.
Can I ask a
Is it a
question
goal?
with this?
Yes.
Dan, to you, could height incentives just strictly mean building a townhome rather than building a single dwelling unit that's expansive rather than tall?
But you wouldn't have to ask permission to build one that's legally
But it
of
says-
the height available.
but it isn't saying that.
Yeah.
It's saying incentives. So it's like a tax break or allowing redrawing of lines to fit another townhome or things like that. It's not necessarily saying. And like I see,
But you wouldn't need to ask permission to build
It's not-
illegally.
it's not saying permission though.
It's
Right,
It's
it's,
just-
an incentive. So you're
Yes.
going to give them something more
Yeah.
than they would get otherwise.
Yeah, just like you would give someone an incentive to build a whole complex rather than just building an
Of
apartment.
course. But the building height now is 35 feet is the limit
Yeah.
in town.
I
And so you were saying, I mean, that would be saying an incentive would be to let them build it higher than that.
no.
No.
That's not necessarily how you could read this.
Okay.
Because and I 100% I understand what you're saying.
I want to understand what you're saying.
I understand that you, and not even to get into the semantics of the 35 to 50, because we all have ranging opinions, ranging
Sure.
thoughts. But in this, it doesn't say anything about offering or suggesting or implementing an actual height increase. It just says offering developers density or height incentives.
Mhm.
So like that's truly, in my eyes, saying offering incentives for individuals or developers to come in and build a duplex or a fourplex or a townhome rather than coming in and building a traditional cul-de-sac.
Sure.
And that's how I'm reading this.
Well,
So
what's an example of a height incentive that wouldn't involve building something taller than you're allowed to build it now?
I think that
I
what
mean,
that
that's what I
could
don't
be is
get.
if you could ask a builder who's building like a duplex rambler side by side, saying the city could come in and, hey, we'll offer you this if you
Yeah.
just
If you
add
build it
another story.
2 stories.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
going over 35
So
feet. to
not
have
going
that,
over
but
the limit, but
Okay.
hey, we
Yeah.
do need more housing for our community. We'll either give you a break on, connections or whatever you need if you just
Right.
go one more story higher.
Yeah.
Right, but in the context of the fact that we discussed building height increases during the last meeting, and that we never discussed building heights before, and it says offer density bonuses already as a goal, and then calling out height specifically, I don't think you need to say more than density increases.
So I
To
think,
me. But I
So
guess, maybe, I see what you guys are saying.
right. I think
But
I would
feel
try
like
to
you could construe it a lot of different ways.
Right. And I think that, I would be a little with that too. The last time we kind of really talked about this was last week. Last month. I spent this time going through Tenino, stopping at different intersections, looking around. And so I think that for a change like this with such large implications, right? And the one thing that kept coming to my mind was the mistake by the lake. Okay.
That building's 100 feet tall, by the way.
Right? But all I'm saying is, as long as I can remember, and I'm 41 years old, that thing until about 2 years ago sat empty and was an eyesore and was just horrible, right? And so I think that if we're looking at changing something that has such an impact, especially when our vision statement of our comp plan specifically states keeping Tenino feeling small, we could quote it, but yeah, I mean, I think going back to this, I hate gray area in language, right? Where all of a sudden we're going, well, I can interpret it like this and you can interpret it like that. I understand at this point in time we're still at a 30,000 foot view, if not higher. But I think just making sure that a decision, again, that's has that big of an impact to a small little valley that we live in, I would want to make sure was vetted more.
So now that everyone's kind of had a chance to talk, I would recommend that you hold off on further discussion, open it up for public comment, close the public comment for the meeting purposes, and then you can deliberate, because I didn't see a lot of questions in there for me, and then if you have questions of me after public comment, we can do that.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so now is the time for public testimony. For time purposes, we're limiting public testimony to 3 minutes per speaker. If time allows, you can have more time at the end. But now we have a sign-up sheet, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's over the top.
Okay. So when I call your name, please step up to the podium, give your name and address for the record. Sean Brown.
Never done this before. Can you hear me? Sean Brown, 187 Hodgson, right across the street there. I'm going to read my husband's and my comments that he sent to Will and Mr. Penrose, and then I have an additional issues with the contract for the Housing Action Plan. There's no explanation of community participation in the development of the plan other than from government and commercial stakeholders. There is no record of public meetings or surveys to get the general population's ideas or concerns. There is no record or recommendation about the ability of the water system and current water rights to support the growth forecast. Same as above for the sewer system. Those things may be beyond the scope of this draft, but certainly do need to be considered when talking about a population increase of 25%. There's no justification for the recommendation for higher building heights, page 14. It is assumed by the reader that higher buildings will allow more people to pack into them. Where is the needs assessment? Why does the city need to grow? Who benefits? And who has predicted how the increase in population will affect the small town quality of life that is enjoyed by a majority of the population? This document lacks merit if that piece is left out. He identified Appendix B and C as missing. We now have those. There's no record of stakeholder interviews or individuals who were interviewed, page 8 and 14. What is the timeline for updating the GMA compliant comprehensive plan? And with the contract that we got from the Department of Commerce, we have issues with item 1 on the scope of work. It says provide for participation and input from community members, community groups, local builders, realtors, nonprofit, housing advocates, and local religious groups. The input from community members is not met. Item action 2, provide for participation and input from community members, not met. Item step 2.1, identify and establish stakeholder groups, including residents, not met. Conduct survey to gather information of community perceptions of housing issues, that's step 2.3, not met. Step 4.1, present draft housing action plan and public hearing before the Planning Commission, not completed, draft is incomplete. Item step 4.2, present draft housing action plan and public hearing before City Council, not completed. In the contract, you have to abide by these, otherwise the contract is null and void. So are we putting ourselves at risk by not doing that? There is no public survey of the community residents in this town. There was no mention in the paper. We didn't get a blurb in the water bill. You need to talk to the people before you start thinking about building up and out. We don't necessarily believe that we're going to grow 396 units or whatever the quote is. We don't have to go that big. Yes, the growth plan, we have to provide for residents. But say, let's apply for 100 people. You know, it
There's
doesn't.
only 2 comments.
It doesn't have to be, you know, what they say in the housing action plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you submit your like what you just read to the staff also, so then it can be sent out to us?
Sure.
Okay.
They have,
I just have one copy.
they have a copy. The
Oh.
staff has a copy already.
Yeah, this copy, but not not the comments about the actual contract.
from.
The contract was just
yes.
sent to us yesterday. I was told that I wasn't going to be able to get it until tomorrow, or no, the 18th, but she threw it in an email this morning or late last night, so.
Well, if there's a way for you to send it to staff so they can send it to us, that'd be great.
There you go.
About the contract?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can do that when I get home.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
thanks. Okay, Jean.
Hope that's out of the sun.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Jean Pettit. I'm at 249 Old Highway 99 North. I haven't done this for a long time. I've been here for 81 years, so I've seen changes and no changes and things that have been going on. And I've seen an increase in cities' population. Basically, I agree with what Mike Brown had to say. I'm disappointed in the fact that there's been no public hearings on this document. There's very poor dissemination of this document, showing that it's made available to the citizens of Tenino. I feel that they have been left out in this process, and I think you should go back and require that some things get done in that direction before this is sent for inclusion in the comprehensive plan. And when they talk about height changes to get the downtown more vital, in all the years that I have lived here, people shop, continue to shop outside of Tenino. It's become a bedroom community. People shop where they work, and they don't work in Tenino. So I am against any height increase to 25 feet. And there's got to be some other ways to create some of the goals within this without that serious an increase in height. And I think there just needs to be more public participation. It hasn't been there. And that's not fair to the community members of Tenino. Most of my friends have been here that long. I come from a family, I come from a family that's been here since, Lord, I don't know. So yes, I know change has to come, but it needs community, public involvement more than what has taken place to date. So that's my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to?
You have to sit over on that side.
I was like, the row behind you looks a little bit more. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeff, when you're ready.
My first meeting, and so I don't have the background to know everything about that. So I just offer a few comments as a contractor.
Oh, please.
My
state your
name, Jeff
and your address.
Eisel.
My bad. Yes.
239 MacArthur Street South,
Yes.
Tenino.
Please proceed.
Of course. The mention in there about incentivizing developers to do business here with a height increase. I understand if we have some huge development like the West Tenino was going to be, that's one of the big boys. For the small infill that we're talking about here, I'm not an expert, but my opinion is there are plenty of smaller contractors that would take on doing that duplex or the fourplex without having any extra incentive. Regarding the incentive, you know, if your city code says you have to build a 2-story building for any new residential structures, or you don't get your permit, it seems to me that is incentive to builders to do what you want them to do, and that's your choice whether you're turning away potential business. But my opinion is, if you make an opportunity for someone to make money here It really doesn't matter what the rules are. You're going to find somebody who's willing to do that. So if the issue here is that people don't want 3-story buildings in town, then get as much as you can with the 2-story buildings. The other thing about doing height, there's also the other dimension, basement dwellings. Dwellings that are partially or completely underground with the appropriate safety egress and whatnot. It's more expensive to excavate for building, but just throwing that out, that there's more than 2 levels on a lot going up. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no further public testimony or comments from staff, the public hearing is closed. The commission will now discuss, deliberate, and render a recommendation. So let's begin our discussion. What do you guys think?
Someone has to move something before you can have discussion.
Is that right?
You can deliberate, they can deliberate as long as you're not deciding outside of the motion. So just general conversation.
What would you say?
Like,
You have to make a motion to approve or something.
like in your instance, you're gonna make a motion to strike these couple things. So if we're going to talk directly to that, you need to make a motion.
Before we can talk.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's like how you're supposed to do it.
okay.
And then that also narrows the subject so that we focus on your thing first, and then we can move to the next thing and the next thing.
We'll
Some
give
of
it.
the stuff they're discussing is kind of addressing the public input and those kind of things that aren't really directly part of the, that's what I'm talking about. When we get to the point, oh, we want to strike this line, I think we need to make a motion to, somebody needs to make a motion, then we can talk about specific changes to the plan. But I think we can still discuss some of the questions that came up here for, and kind of get a feeling of how people are feeling about, should we wait before we even make a motion to get more public information, or, try to explain the process with the city council where there'll be more public, so.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start it out. So
Go for it.
first thing, I think that a lot of times we make decisions on smaller things. On a bigger thing like this, thank you all for coming out. This is probably some of the most public that we've had a meeting in the last 5 years.
We never have a
Right?
public, we never
And-
have public.
Well, but the joke is right, is like, we are a government of the people, for the people, but I can't tell you how many times people don't show up, right, to talk and to give us their feedback. So I really appreciate that. Now, the next thing, I'm really, really big into transparency of government, right? And making sure that everyone feels like they've had their share of the information, that they've had their ability to talk. So, Dan, I was just wondering, can we kind of touch base on that, on maybe some of the things that we did to try to get community input or involvement as we went through this process?
Yeah, and I guess on the scope, and I believe we shared that scope with you several different times. The contractual obligation comes in the deliverables, and the deliverables were all met, and Commerce has received those deliverables and has reimbursed the city for the expenses towards the contract. Because in the course of a year and a half or almost 2 years worth of a process, there are some things that are going to be met more than others, and so there's some fungibility on there. So, for example, we decided not to do a community survey. I asked about that, and the decision was made that it wasn't the best use of the funds at the time. But we had I believe we had 5 or 6 planning commission meetings on it. I kind of listed some of the outreach efforts starting in January 13th with the planning commission kickoff. We had community interviews in August of 2022 and a variety of pieces. And the plan's not adopted yet. Like, this public hearing is actually part of the outreach still. It's still open for the comment period, remains open, and you can extend the comment period if you wish. So that's how I would directly answer that piece. Is there's We didn't go door to door. I've used utility flyers before. I really like them. They're really effective. But in a setting like this, especially so close to the comp plan outreach effort, which will have much more extensive community engagement and specifically related to downtown and land use and housing, the grant didn't require that type of public engagement, and so we kind of chose to apply our efforts in different spots in that.
So as far as commerce is concerned, we've met all the requirements.
Yeah, Commerce has, we've closed the grant technically. I think actually Jen submitted the closure paperwork last week, if not Monday. So yeah, the grant's closed, and the Commerce, to their credit, they did 300 of these across the state this cycle. So, they got a lot of HAPs on their plate.
Can I make some clarifications? I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. We're not adopting this plan. We're just saying this is what we think should pass on to the council. The council adopts it. So we're not adopting anything. So when we do this, we're just saying, here's what we think's best. This goes to the council for further public input, further consideration by them, hearing from the public. So I just want to make sure we're all clear. We're not adopting this. This is because we vote on this doesn't mean we're adopting it. So there is further chance for public input, and
Sure.
Everybody should see this document. Hopefully it'll be posted wherever so anybody in the city can see it and make comment at the time the city council considers it. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there, that, this is not set in stone. In addition to that, this is more, to me, is a guidebook for our comp plan update. So like you said, this is kind of some of the things we think should be considered when we look at our comp plan to address growth issues in housing in our community. And so at that time, like you said, there's going to be much public input that will, when we talk about any of these things in the comp plan, there'll be more opportunities. So for me, this is our first kind of push out there. Here's public, what we think. It's going to go to the city council, but where the public will really have the voices when we do the comprehensive plan update, where we actually implement these into our city codes and planning.
Yeah.
So I think there's more opportunity for the public to get very involved with this.
Yeah, and that's right. You are making a recommendation to either approve or deny the plan. So denial is reject the plan altogether.
Or they could change it.
That'd be pretty rough. And more than likely, yeah, if instead of denying it, perhaps changing it or approving it outright. But then, yeah, it's not. The council can choose to have a public hearing. I don't believe the code requires it if it's held at this level. So it's up to the council whether they want to open it back up for another public hearing. That's their call. Like I said, we're sort of bound by trying to get this thing done in the next 7 weeks, and I think there's enough time to do that. But that's up to the council to decide. But it's a policy document, and it's really a precursor to the conversation we're going to have on the comp plan in the next year and a half.
I mean, there's a couple of things in there that I would change. I mean, we talked about transportation. It says working with intercity transit, which I think it should be changed to say, look at alternate transportation versus just working with intercity transit. Maybe something I bring up to city council, they choose to change.
Yeah.
Or we can change it here if we want to in our discussions. But yeah, I just want to make sure the public knows this is, I understand every time we do something like this, especially these bigger things, I think there's frustration that we haven't reached out to the public enough. And, you can say we have or haven't. I mean, everybody's going to have their opinion. Yeah, like you said, we had so much time and so many resources to get this done, and we tried to choose the best way to get the input that we could with the limited amount of dollars we had. And,
Good statement. Nice. Further discussion?
No, I think I'm good at the moment.
Yeah, I would just again say I think that since I joined the planning commission almost 5 years ago, I've always been big on infill I've always been big on trying to create a downtown that attracts people, right, to some degree or another. And at times over the last 5 years, it seems like we've gotten closer to that. You know, and then COVID and certain things like that have sure thrown a wrench in the spokes. But I, appreciate what you said. I think that there are many different ways that we could go about this. And I think just to sum it up, my biggest thing is just, when we're talking about a particular path forward that has potential ramifications and they could impact as greatly as 5-story buildings, I just want to make sure that that's something that we acknowledge and that we discuss and that we, take into consideration. So I guess my question is, from this point here, because it's, of this plan, it seems like there's kind of that one item that's a hot ticket item. So how does this move forward through the process? That's what I'm wondering.
I would move that we recommend approval of the housing action plan, except with the changes striking the specific term building heights in the document, because it incorrectly attributes its presence as coming from stakeholders when it did not come from stakeholders. It is a density incentive purely, and so saying density incentive rather than calling out building height specifically, which sort of assumes that somehow the stakeholders wanted that, I would be okay with moving it forward. Absent of that, assuming that, Comments is okay with our process.
And I recommend a different way to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think you feel so strongly about this. I don't think, in your opinion, it should move to the council even with that language in here at all. So I think you should start by striking it completely.
The whole thing?
Yeah, all of those pages.
Okay. But
And
that's
that-
what I meant.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I have one other thing that's very small. But,
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
No, so I think you started, so I'm gonna let you start.
Okay.
But I think you should just focus on that for a second, because then I'll focus on my little thing for just a second, and then we can approve the whole thing as amended.
And so
Okay.
so what I hear you saying, because
I thought we had to make a recommendation in order to be able to begin the discussion of how to.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You can do, you can make the little changes, and then at the very end, I would suggest saying we recommend it as amended
Okay.
to the council.
So I recommend that we strike the mention of building heights as one of the incentives possible in the variety of potential density incentives that we could offer, because we haven't discussed it and I feel it's too controversial to write in as a goal when it seems seemingly coming out of nowhere. So I would say I want to see that stricken from the document. Now, you do your bit, is that right?
No,
Can
we
I
started.
comment on that? I agree.
Wait.
It's such a hot.
Wait. It has to be seconded first. So,
Second.
I'm confusing all of you, but I think this is the best way.
Second.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
I second that.
Okay,
Did you get that, Courtney?
there we go.
And that's from page 14.
It's mentioned on page 14.
Page 27
27 and,
and 30.
yeah, 30.
So to be specific, striking the fifth bullet, increasing maximum height allowances from the recommendation from stakeholder box, right?
Yes.
So strike that bullet altogether. And then you'd also like 27 to strike the action 3 under goal reduce costs, the orange one.
Yeah,
Just
and then
strike the
Or you just want to-
height and just the word height.
I think allowing density concessions is
Tell me what you want that to say.
density incentives. Allow density incentives. Yeah, it's just calling out one of many specific things that we could offer,
Okay.
but it seems.
And then was there one more?
Yeah, on page 8. Or is that right?
Page 3.
Oh no, it's where?
Here, page 3.
Page 14.
Yeah, we got it.
We got that one.
Yeah.
Recommendations from stakeholders. They didn't recommend building height.
Yeah, we
You
got
did
it.
that one.
And then
Okay.
the other one.
And then 27 and 30 is the other one.
27. 30 is the last one. And 30 is you want goal reduce costs to allow more low and moderate income housing options. number 3, offer developers density and or height incentives, just to read the same as the previous one?
Yeah, just density incentives.
Okay. You have all track that?
I'm sorry.
Paying attention. There's a quiz at the end. But
Sorry
that's
about
important
that.
because if I revise the document.
No, yeah, you want to do it right.
there's changes.
Yes, thank
So
you.
there's discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Say
agree.
what?
That doesn't mean, I don't think it means we can't discuss heights.
No,
like you said,
Right.
within the current limits, so I think it's
I'm
fine
not
to
saying we
strike
should never
that.
discuss it.
Totally. And my just I think my little tidbit is I think that it just removes what could be looked at as like direction,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
does that make sense? So
Yes.
I like that. That's what we're taking off there. We're not kind of leading the path.
Yeah, we're
We're not
saying
putting the
anything.
carrot out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I like it.
I just want to say that no matter how I personally feel, I think the fact that all 3 people and the only 3 people who showed up specifically said that they don't support it, and if that's all the public opinion we have, that's the public opinion we should listen to. So like if someone else were here contesting the other side, then it might be a different story. But I think when the public shows up and that's all the public says, it speaks volumes of what the public wants.
Okay.
I guess I would add that it was unfortunate that there were 2 public hearings tonight, and one of them was on an increase to the height, and so it may artificially juice that
Yeah.
particular subject.
I think it did.
Because so that would be just a comment.
I think
That was my first thought, too.
That's true, but I mean, public appearance is important. And,
Okay. Any more?
so, do you want to?
You just vote. We vote on that first.
Okay. All those in favor of striking, making those changes to building heights on pages 14, 27, and 30. All those in, I mean, I guess I'll make a motion to.
No, all
Yes, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Sorry. Okay.
I would move to change bullet. Okay, hold on. Right, I'll start on page 27. In the orange, reduce costs to allow low and moderate income housing. That one. Action 2, I would like to change the word discuss and insert the word review options too, because I think that's much more action oriented. And that doesn't necessarily say we have to, doesn't give any other specific directions, but I think that's important because all of the other words in the whole document are action oriented. And that would also change page 30, dead center in the middle, and the same exact wording. So then someone has to second that.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, no one else wants to change.
Yes. Does anyone else want to discuss any
I had
potential
one
changes?
language change too, and I don't have, my pages here aren't the same. There's a section that talks
20.
about transportation and working with.
Yeah, it's page 27, develop partnership with intercity transit.
Yeah, I think it should just because we've had issues with intercity transit and they pulled out of Tenino. And so I'm not saying we shouldn't talk with intercity transit, but I think it should also say, just look at transportation alternatives besides just intercity transit, because I think that we should look at we could do car sharing program, or we could look at other things that would allow some better transportation, public transportation. So
That leaves open to Twin City, just whatever.
yeah, or whoever it is, yeah.
Maybe just say develop partnerships with. Second.
All those in favor?
Oh,
Now we can discuss.
Oh, now we discuss.
I think that's a great idea. How did you write that down though?
Yeah, I can do that. It's probably develop partnership transportation providers to expand transit options or transportation options to additional areas of the city, something like that. Dave, do you
Yeah,
okay with that?
yeah.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't stop us from
Yeah, that was
considering
my
any
only
other
question.
things, but
Yeah.
I think
Do you want it to say transit in particular?
I mean, transit's one thing. My
Right.
thought was like car sharing. I
Yeah,
mean,
but see,
something
yeah,
I've been
car
working on
sharing's
is
not
having
transit.
small car sharing service that people could use versus since our transportation is so limited with the time. So I don't know how best to say that, but that was just kind of what one of the options that, you know, it may
Just
not
keep it
involve
less
intercity
specific,
transit.
yeah.
It may be something the city does.
That makes sense.
So I'll read that back, and I'll fix it in the other spot too. Action 3, develop partnership with transportation providers to expand services to additional areas of the city.
I think that's, yeah,
Magic?
yeah, I think that works.
That sounds
Yeah.
good.
And that's on page 27 and page 30.
I don't know, I have it on my phone and it's not the same page numbers for some reason.
Any other discussion?
Seems good to me.
I'm good.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, sounds good. Any other changes?
No.
Okay. With that, I guess, at this point, I'll make a motion to approve the housing action plan and send it on to the city council with the changes that we have discussed.
I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Can we have a discussion? I think we should change that motion just a little bit because
Go ahead.
we had some issues with our last thing we sent to them that we didn't recommend to pass it. So are we
Okay,
Yeah,
good
good
point.
call.
Okay. I move that the planning commission make a recommendation to the city council to pass the housing action plan or adopt the housing action plan with the changes as specified by the planning commission. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nice. Okay. We've done a public hearing. Good work. No unfinished business then, no new business. And with that, I guess,
Wait, can I ask you a question?
yes.
Just because it got brought up a couple times, with the comp plan, is there like a survey element that's required, or what is, just like to address that concern? Like,
Yeah, sure, that's it.
Like,
That's a good question. It's not required, and I think, but it's certainly, we've done lots of them. I like it. I like surveys a lot. I think the more input you get in the survey, the better you can feel about the results. So we've got a number of tools to do that. We have interactive mapping tools where you can, mark where you think, new parks should be, or circle a area sidewalk you think is crumbling. I mean, there's a lot of different options there. The budget for the commerce grant for the comp plan periodic update is being, we're drafting that now, and we should have it in a week or so to submit to commerce, is $100,000. Which sounds like a lot of money, but we just did a housing action plan for 75. So this is like one piece, and so I think we should be. You saw the scope of work last meeting, and it didn't get all the way down to the survey level as far as like each individual task that's going to go is kind of a higher level run by. But I would just suggest that you help us prioritize what it is you want. The comp plan as it stands is good. Fred Evander did a marvelous job on it. I think a lot of the vision statements still hold true. There's a lot of good focus on the downtown. There's some stuff about design guidelines. There's infill discussion. But the pieces that need to be adjusted are mostly the land use map needs to be flexed as a result of the West Tenino Mazamba Pocket Gopher impacts. And I think there's also some infrastructure stuff, as was mentioned. I think the water sewer. I mean, water sewer stuff's real, right? I mean, so if you have really, really high sewer bills, that impacts affordability, for example. So I think you should help us. We brought it to you 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago to help us kind of prioritize our level of effort, because everything can't be a priority or nothing's going to be. So I think there's sections in there that have to get fixed, and then there's going to be some nice to haves or want to haves, and that would be where you'd say, we really want to do a survey, or we really want to do a public workshop and, you know, have people mark up a map with stickies and dots or whatever. Did that answer your question?
That's great.
I would just add that I'll try to make sure that I let people know when it's going to be heard at the city council, and try to encourage the city to get something out so people have every opportunity to know when the city council is going to be looking at this and be able to have comment on that. So
The comp plan?
no, this update.
Oh, the HAP. Okay.
Yeah, and the comp plan too when it comes around. But yes, I'll try to encourage the city to get that word out, and I will do my part too to try to get it out to people. And I think we all should take individual responsibility a little bit, as much as we can, to let people know that, because this is a big deal for people. And yeah, so
I think public participation in the comp plan, this is probably one
Yeah.
of the more important comp plans, in the sense that there are a lot of big potential changes that we're supposed to be tackling in the next 20 years, and public participation is going to be key, I think. Keep people happy, if possible. So. All right, well, with that, I guess the meeting is adjourned.
What I will say is that it's really hot outside, and the state's probably going to require a climate change element as part of the comp plan updates. And we will probably apply for additional grant money to do a climate change element, because that's what's floating out there, what's allowed. So we're not really sure how that all comes together yet. And there's a wildlife urban interface. We talked about that a little bit about 3 weeks ago.
Is that still set for October?
Yeah. So that'll have to be rolled into the land use element, and who knows whatever